Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shrivasadi Gaura Bhakta Brinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Namaskar, Hare Krishna. So today I have been asked to speak on origin of life, both from the perspective of modern present day science and also from the perspective of our scriptures, Vedic scriptures. What is life has always been a question in the minds of thoughtful people. Schrödinger, if you remember our school days, he wrote a monogram, What is Life? And some 10-15 years back in Science magazine, they published some important unresolved mysteries. And one among them was, again, same thing, what is life? So, this thought, what is life first, and then what is the origin of life, is very important for all of us, for the whole human society. Because if we don't understand what is life, then obviously we will not understand what is healthy life, how to interact in a healthy way with each other, with other living entities, and with this whole world around us. So therefore, we will try to discuss this topic today, seeing where do we stand from the perspective of modern science, and then we will discuss about need of a different paradigm to look at this question. And we propose that our Vedic perspective on life is a paradigm which can actually resolve many mysteries around life, what is life, and what is the origin of life. And then from there, further insights into the purpose of existence, purpose of our existence in human forms, etc. So, if we go some 1,000 years back, when Socrates was there, the general understanding amongst the people of those times, especially given by philosophers like Socrates, was that life ultimately is a non-physical entity. He was given hemlock to drink, and his associates, just the day before he was supposed to drink this deadly poison, they asked him to flee away, and they had devised a means how he can flee away from the custodian, that prison. But Socrates denied. He said that this is morally wrong and it is against the real understanding from the spiritual perspective, because ultimately we don't die. So that was the time when philosophers used to think that life is ultimately a non-physical phenomena. But then, over the last few hundred years, with the advent of what we call as modern science, from the era of Renaissance, the mainstream science has generally favored the idea that everything is matter. This is called materialistic viewpoint. Whatever exists is matter. All the phenomena, whatever we perceive, we see, can be explained in completely mechanistic terms. That means we can explain everything in terms of the laws of nature, the laws of physics, laws of chemistry, and ultimately can be presented in numerical form, mathematical formulas. So basically that is the main idea behind the modern science. It is also called reductionistic approach, which means that all the complex phenomena can be reduced to very simple elements and very simple laws as we understand today, and we don't need to consider anything non-material to explain anything about this existence. This is the predominant idea of the modern science. So, as a consequence of this, we find that modern science tends to believe that man is nothing but a machine. And there have been efforts to actually replicate all the functions of a human being by machines. Now we are living in the era of artificial intelligence, and the root of the development of that whole department is that ultimately man is a sophisticated machine. So we can create a machine which ultimately can even supersede a human being. Now in medical field also, we see that with artificial intelligence, doctors are also getting replaced. And it is hoped by the science that one day all human race will be replaced, can be replaced by robots, and the day will come when these robots will far exceed human intelligence and everything, and if they like, they will keep the human beings as slaves. That's still the days yet to come, but that's a hope. Richard Dawkins, he's a zoologist, he's an atheist. He says that human beings are nothing but robot vehicles which are blindly programmed by selfish molecules called genes. So this is the mainstream thought today in the modern science, that we are nothing but machines. And in fact, we see that human being, there are behavioral patterns which can be replaced by machines. This is we are seeing everywhere. Machines are replacing many things which human can do. They can do better than human beings. For example, a human being sees, say, a red light or a green light. May I request you to kindly turn your mobiles into silent mode? Please check my mobile also, in the second pocket, yeah. Thank you. So, when we see a particular wavelength, which we recognize this as a red light, then we see that and we say it is red light. Now we can also design a machine, and then that same frequencies when are perceived by the lens of that machine, and then the machine can also say, I see a red light. But then, do we believe that that machine also experiences seeing that red light as we experience seeing that red light? No, we don't expect that the machine experiences that, correct? Similarly, another example, we can, when we are hit by a hammer, then we feel pain and we cry. So we can design a machine that a certain pressure is applied on that machine, and there can be sensors, and then there is a speaker, and then the machine cries as a human being cries. But we don't expect that the machine experiences the pain as we experience. So there are two things which are happening. One is the experience, perception, and another is the associated behavior. We feel the pain and then we cry. So crying is the behavior associated with the perception of pain. So machines can mimic the behavioral part, but we don't expect machines to ever become conscious. Consciousness, though this topic today, origin of life, or actually it's about consciousness, because the thing which differentiates life from non-life is consciousness. And when we say consciousness, what do we mean by that exactly? Consciousness is the phenomenon of being aware that we exist. We are all aware that we exist. Being aware of our perceptions. We are aware of our happiness, of our distress, of whatever we experience. We are aware of that. We are aware that we are seers. We are aware that we are doers. We do actions and then we are aware that we are doing that actions. So that awareness is the essence of that consciousness. So we don't expect that the machines, though they can perform many actions as done by us, they can respond to stimuli as we do, but we don't expect them to be conscious of what they are responding or what they are perceiving. So there is an intrinsic difference between a machine and a living entity. The patterns can be imitated, but that awareness cannot be. I will take another example. Like suppose this is a book. This is a book written by a scientist, and it is about Darwinism. It explains about Darwinism. So there is a message in this book. From the physical point of view, what is this book? This book is paper and ink. In simple terms, what is this book? This is paper and ink. But is this all about this book? The paper and the ink? No. This ink is spread in a certain complicated pattern that it contains a message. Correct? So though physically we can reduce this book in terms of paper and ink, but the message which it contains cannot be reduced in terms of the laws of physics and chemistry as we understand today. So this book is ultimately non-reducible. The message in it is non-reducible. It remains complex. This book is not aware of Darwinism, though it has all that ink and everything. It needs a human being like me and you, who when we read this and then we become aware of the message in this book. This book doesn't become aware of that message. So, similarly, a living entity has that element in it which becomes aware of that content of the phenomena which it perceives, which cannot be described, which cannot be reduced in terms of simple laws of physics and chemistry. So at least we can logically understand, and from a simple scientific way also we can understand that human beings, they have two aspects. There is some aspect which can be mechanical, which can be replaced by machines, but there is also an aspect which is non-mechanical. And actually there are scientists who clearly see that these are two different components, matter and spirit, in a living entity. As we see some of the quotes. Yeah, can you please go to the next slide? This is Thomas Huxley. He was a contemporary of Darwin. I understand the main tenet of materialism to be that there is nothing in the universe but matter and force, and that all the phenomena of nature are explicable by deduction from the properties assignable to these two primary primitive factors. It seems to me pretty plain that there is a third thing in the universe, to wit, consciousness, which I cannot see to be matter or force or any conceivable modification of either. Next slide. This is Eugene Wiener, he is a Nobel laureate. He says, there are two kinds of reality or existence. The existence of my consciousness and the reality or existence of everything else. So, in this way, it is not that all the scientists, they hold similar opinion. With their especially scientific research, there are more and more evidence in front of science to consider that origin of life we are unable to explain in completely mechanistic terms. What have been the endeavors of science to explain life, origin of life in terms of mechanistic terms? How much successful they have been? Let's go over some examples of that. The main efforts in science which we have done to understand life in terms of purely mechanistic terms. Yeah, go to the next slide. Now this is Stanley Miller's experiment. Again, if you go back to our 10th, 12th class science books, we all studied that how Stanley Miller, they did an experiment in their laboratory where they tried to pass some current in a certain chemical soup which was understood to be similar to the prebiotic chemicals which existed, and the idea was that if we can develop some molecules which are seen in the life forms, and that was supposed to hint about the chemical origin of life, that ultimately life originated in chemicals. So according to Stanley Miller themselves, they simulated the early Earth atmosphere, but now we understand, as the science has moved further, that the atmosphere which we thought existed in the prebiotic age is different from what Stanley Miller thought it to be. So that is the first thing, that the very premise of the experiment has been proved to be wrong today. The resulting amino acids were not the right ones found in life, only right-handed ones created. So we know that there are levo and dextro rotatory amino acids. So in the living forms, we find only one particular type. But in this experiment, all types of amino acids were created. So actually, this experiment did not hint that chemicals, life has originated from chemicals, because just something happened. It's not like only those molecules which exist in the life were created. Then amino acids, no, I'm reading the first one yet. Just see what I'm reading. Amino acids removed artificially from the apparatus. Now, there is a tendency that when these molecules are formed, soon they get destroyed, transformed. So, he removed these amino acids as and when they were formed. But in the nature, we don't expect that there will be removal of these chemicals as they are formed. They are just there. Who will remove them and where they will remove to? So again, this is a simulation, but which differed very much from the natural circumstances. So again, this experiment in itself did not actually prove that life originated in chemical. Next. Ultimately, amino acids could not form proteins without DNA, RNA protein mechanism, thus chicken and egg problem. And ultimately, even if some amino acids were produced, but as we understand that there are proteins, there are catalysts, and then there are information carrying molecules in the form of DNA and RNA, and which comes first, as we have the chicken or the egg. So similarly, we have here also, is it the DNA, RNA first, or is it the proteins first? Because without proteins, we don't expect DNA and RNA, and without DNA and RNA, we don't expect proteins. So similar problem is faced here also. Next, in terms of Stanley Miller themselves, the origin of life has turned out to be much more difficult than I and most other people envisioned. So this is in his own wordings. Now, Stanley Miller time, and from that time we have moved further. Now there is a talk of the life actually is represented by RNA. We talk in terms of RNA world. RNA world, because RNA has a property of both proteins as well as DNA. DNA has a property of only information. It only has a information carrying molecule. But RNA has both the properties. So therefore, there is a thought that the first molecules which actually gave symptoms of life is RNA. But there is a book, and there are many such books. This is Rethinking Darwinism. There is a whole chapter dedicated to this. With more research, what scientists have found that actually RNA, again, the problem is the same. The building blocks of those RNA, what happened that the RNA was formed? There is no laws of physics and chemistry which can explain the particular sequence. The sequencing cannot be explained. Like, these are alphabets A to Z, and they are arranged in a particular form. There is no laws of physics and chemistry which can explain why this ABCD are arranged in a particular fashion as in this book. There is no physical law which can explain that. It's the author who had a theme in his mind, and therefore he arranged letters in a way which form words and sentences, and then it communicates a message. This cannot be explained in terms of physics and chemistry. Similarly, the case with DNA and RNA. The DNA, it carries information, as there is information in this book. Similarly, DNA is also having information. But that information is in the form of codes. Nucleotides are there are different codes for different proteins, amino acids. But that particular sequence, there is no laws of physics which can explain why this particular sequence came into existence. There is no laws of physics which can explain that. Like a simple example, this hall has a particular length and breadth. There is no laws of physics which can explain why this hall has this particular length and breadth only. Because it is based on the designer's thought. He could have designed it 2 feet lengthier or 2 feet smaller. There is no laws in physics or chemistry which dictates that this hall has to be of this size only. So there are aspects which are mechanical, and there are aspects which are not mechanical. Now, in the last especially 150 years or so, since Darwin's time, there has been a lot of encouragement. I think it's got on again because it's very. Okay, I'll try. Since the time of Darwin, there has been a lot of encouragement towards this mechanistic view, because Darwin's evolution theory seems to have given a mechanical way how different species have come into existence. Darwin wrote the book Origin of Species. He did not speak about origin of life in that book, but his understanding was that life ultimately originated from chemicals. That means ultimately life is a physical entity, and that whole evolution theory supported that chemical origin of life itself. Now, in some slides, we will just go through how much scientifically that this Darwin's theory have stood the test of time, and they stood the test of experimentation, observation, scientific experimentation and observation. Yeah, please go to the next slide. So this is some very basic biology. we have a species and we have varieties. Cow is a species and there are Sahiwal, Gir and different varieties. Dogs can have different varieties. Yes, next slide. Now, just in brief, what Darwin has said, that if there is a particular species, say the ancestor, the single species which existed, and there is some environmental pressure happening, there is lack of food, there is too much cold, whatever, some sort of environmental pressure, then varieties in the members of a species come into existence. Because of that pressure, different varieties, acquired traits, like when we go to gym, then our particular biceps, they become stronger. So these are acquired traits, and because of that, different varieties come into existence. That was the hypothesis. And then the members with advantageous traits live longer and produce more offsprings, and those with disadvantageous traits, they live less and produce less offsprings. Yes. Are you able to hear me? There is a lot of echo here, I see. Is it clear? Okay. Acquired advantageous traits transferred to offsprings. That was his idea. That acquired traits are transferred to offsprings. Yes. The population of the members increases. Those with those traits which are advantageous, their number increases, and they are able to transfer that to their offsprings because they reach the fertility stage, and so their traits are transferred. But those with disadvantageous variations, they don't live longer to procreate, and their traits are not transferred to their next generation. And in this way, those members who had advantageous traits, they are able to transfer and their number keep on increasing. Yes. And this phenomenon is repeated again and again and again. Yes, go. And like that, ultimately, over a period of big distances of time, new species originate. Variation happening to an extent that it becomes a different, distinct species altogether. That is what Darwin postulated. Now, the problems with this concept as we in science understand today, yes, go to the next slide, go to the next. Where do the modifications come from? According to Darwinism, they come from acquired traits. Acquired traits are transferred to the next generation according to Darwin. But today's modern science, we understand this is not true. A father can have biceps developed because of going to gym. We don't expect that his son will also have a developed biceps just because his father had. Only genetic traits are transferred, not the acquired traits. Yes. Actually, Darwin was a very expert breeder. He used to breed dogs and different animals. So when you breed, then you get different varieties, correct? So, but in breeding what is happening is genetic material is getting crossed. It is not the acquired traits, but he was not having any understanding of genetics at that time. Genetics developed later on. So that was his assumption, which proved wrong later on, that acquired traits can be transferred. Yes, please. Next slide. Next. Next. So when it comes to breeding, nature has put limits to which a characteristic can be changed. By breeding, among the dogs or among any plant, we can develop tomatoes of smaller size, bigger size. To some extent, we can have variations, but we cannot expect from a tomato that we can give rise to a papaya, for example. Within the tomatoes, we can have variations, but not that we can have a papaya coming from a tomato. No, just before that. No new characteristics can be brought by breeding, only the already existing characteristics can be changed. Yeah, next slide. So this is from a French zoologist who, about this Darwinism theory, he says, in spite of the intense pressure generated by artificial selection, eliminating any parent not answering the criteria of choice, over whole millennia, no new species are born. A comparative study of sera, hemoglobins, blood proteins, interfertility, etc. proves that the strains remain within the same specific definition. This is not a matter of opinion or subjective classification, but a measurable reality. The fact is that selection gives tangible form to and gathers together all the varieties a genome is capable of producing, but does not constitute an innovative evolutionary process. Next slide. Next. So breeding is also cannot give rise to new species. Acquired traits don't get transferred to the next generation at all. Next. Now we come to new Darwinism. With the development of genetics, now we have entered into the arena of new Darwinism. So Darwin was wrong in many of his assumptions, but today modern science, they still follow Darwinian opinion that ultimately different species originated from a single ancestor due to process of natural selection. So then what led to different modifications and what was naturally selected? According to New Darwinism, these are random genetic mutations. Yeah. Now these random genetic mutations are said to be the source of modification in New Darwinism. Yeah. Next slide. Next. But the problem with this random genetic mutations to be a cause for development of newer species are, first, very weak mechanism to bring favorable modifications, as it is random. Changes may not occur when they are needed. Now in Darwin's theory, the environmental pressure was the cause for modification. Correct? So there was a link. When it is, like it is said, reptiles were there, and then all the food was finished on the ground, and then there was a necessity to eat something, and so the animal had to raise his neck, and with that there was environmental pressure, and then the neck grew, and then giraffe came into existence. So there was a link, logical link. But when it comes to random genetic mutations, they are random. They don't correspond to a particular need, and this random, they can occur at a time when they are not needed, so they will not give any advantage to the particular member, as in the case postulated by Darwin. So therefore this is a very weak mechanism. It's a very weak mechanism. Next. In history of genetics and medical science, most mutations have proved to be unfavorable. In medical science we see so many diseases associated with these mutations. We don't find generally that mutations are favorable. In general, most of the random mutations are unfavorable. So therefore, to explain how all different varieties of species could have come into existence due to random mutation is a far leap of faith. It is not very logical, reasonable. Yeah, next. For detail, there is a book, Edge of Evolution by Michael Behe. More details about this argument there. Next. Now, in our textbook, we see there are examples where this evolution has happened. Darwin's finches, herring, gull, these are all in the textbooks, biology textbooks, regularly we see them. Next slide. But if you go into the depth, speciation, whether in the remote Galapagos in the laboratory cages of the Drosophila or in the crowded sediments of paleontologists, still have never been traced. Actually, whatever we read in our textbooks, if you go into the depth, they are presented as if facts, but if you go in the real depth, they are not facts and they have been proved wrong many times, but still they continue in the textbooks. Next. Survival of the fittest. Next. Survival of the fakest. Science says survival of the fittest, but actually what is happening is the survival of the fakest, because by some unknowingly, there is a mechanism in science called filtration. Whatever is corresponding to the main understanding of science is accepted, and whatever observation is seen which is different from the ordinarily accepted view is somehow rejected. That somehow there will be some mistake in collecting this observation, something. This is called filtration of knowledge. This is an accepted phenomena in the scientific field, filtration of knowledge. Yeah, next. For example, we are all familiar with this figure, correct? This is Haeckel's drawing, and he showed how there is similarity in the embryos of different species. And by that, he tries to conclude that shows that we all different species had a common ancestor. Okay? Therefore, as we go back to the embryonic stages, there is similarity. And as there is further differentiation, there are differences. And this is said to be a proof of that, that when we see the embryos and they are showing much similarity. But actually, if really we see the embryos, they don't look like this. This is a fake figure drawn by Haeckel, and biologists at that time also knew that this is fake. This is not true. So there is a biologist who actually has been a teacher of biology. He has taught Darwinism throughout his life, and once he was given this idea that is Darwinism really true, and then he started seeing this, and then he went into depth and see how actually embryos look like, and then he found that actually this is all fake. So like that. Next. Similarly, we are familiar with this drawing as well in all our textbooks. It shows how present day Homo sapiens sapiens have evolved from apes, and there seems to be a continuum, and there have been some missing links in the archaeological survey, and it was expected that if you find this missing link, then the link will be, they will not be missing, they will be continuous. So Piltdown Man, there is a place Piltdown, and it was said that we have found a fossil which has filled that gap, and now we get this continuous figure which explains Darwin evolution theory. But it was found out that this Piltdown, that fossil records, they were tempered. They were made purposefully to fill that gap. And there are hundreds and thousands of such findings where archaeological records have been tempered, or the records which went against the Darwin theory were just put in some storage, not brought forward. There is a whole book written about it. Yeah, next slide. Icons of Evolution. This is a book written by one scientist which gathers all such logical as well as observational facts which goes against Darwinism. Yeah. Fossil evidences, molecular evidence, and Stanley Miller's experiment. Basically, he says that how these three are the primary proof for Darwinism. But these all three things, if you go in depth, they don't prove Darwinism. Next. This is about the fossil evidence, the first evidence of Darwinism, which is said to be evidence. But we see that fossil records, this is a paleontologist who says, we are now about 120 years after Darwin, and knowledge of the fossil record has been greatly expanded. Ironically, we have even fewer examples of evolutionary transition than we had in Darwin time. Next slide. In archaeology, there is one concept which is called Cambrian explosion. What does it mean? This is expected graph as per evolution. That means if evolution really happened, so as we go down in the lower strata, we will find the fossil records of lesser and lesser variety. And as we will move up, we should find fossils of variety of species. Correct? Because older times, there was a common ancestors. It's like a tree. So this is what we expect. As we go down beneath, there should be lesser number of phyla. And as we come up on the top layers, we should find more number of phyla. And there should be a gradual graph. This is what we expect. But exactly what is observed by archaeology is different. Next slide. What we see that just 600 million years ago, in those layers which are said to be formed 600 million years ago, in those layers we find suddenly there is emergence of all different varieties which we find today. We don't find a gradual evolution of different species happening, rather it is at one shot in a very short span that all these phyla came into existence. This is called Cambrian explosion. This goes against Darwinism. Next slide. So there is a whole book written, Forbidden Archaeology, by these two researchers, which shows hundreds and thousands of those fossil records which goes against Darwinism evolution theory. Because according to Darwin evolution theory, modern Homo sapiens sapiens, they are a certain age evolution, they evolved certain time before, some 1 lakh years or something like that. But we have found fossil records of developed human beings and their artifacts going back millions and millions of years back, which are not recorded, which are not produced in our textbooks. They are just dumped. So this records, all those records. Yeah, next slide. Another book, Hidden History of Human Race, by these two authors, similar theme. Next. These are some examples. We found this modern human tools. This is modern man, made by modern man, 55 million years old, 55 million years old. This is completely against evolution theory. Next, 600 million years old flower vase, documented in Scientific American. But in our textbooks, we don't find them, because whatever observations are in alignment with the contemporary thought, they are given precedence, and whatever is against that, they are felt to be not very important. So this is called filtration of knowledge. So therefore, the records of the proof of the Darwinism actually is anti-proof. So Stanley Miller experiment also did not prove the chemical origin. Evolution theory is also having big questions, and therefore we have to consider that from the modern science perspective also, origin of life, understanding that life is nothing but matter, is actually not proved scientifically. It has not been proved. Rather, there are evidences which goes against that. Next slide. The third thing was the molecular evidence. Similar evolution we should see in the molecules, the reductionism. We should be able to reduce the molecules in simple terms, but scientists are finding that the molecules are irreducible. Like for example, next slide, next slide, next. This is electron microscopic view of a Escherichia coli flagellum, its motor, which helps it to move and find its way ahead. Now, this particular motor, it consists of hundreds of proteins, molecules, which assemble together and which make it function. It is very similar to how we see today machines made by us. So, it is consisted of so many parts, very intricately connected to each other. All the parts, unless all of them together they come at one time, that whole motor will not function. Okay, so it is very difficult to explain that how these 100 or 200 odd proteins would have evolved one by Darwinian evolution theory, because according to Darwinian evolution theory, a variation or a change which provides some benefit to the member is preserved. But suppose this motor has 200 parts and the first part evolved, but then the first part has got no benefit to provide to the member, because this whole machine needs 200 parts. That one part will extract energy to maintain, so it will be disadvantageous for that member. So therefore, it will not be continued to the next generation. Then how can we expect that another second part adds to it, then third part adds to it, then fourth part? Because all the parts are required for the motor to become functional, and then only it will provide a benefit to the member. So this is called irreducible complexity. We find at the molecular level also that the human body, it's complex and it is irreducible. We all know about the blood clotting cascade, fibrogen, and how there are different factors. So it cannot be explained how randomly, gradually they could have evolved, because the whole mechanism needs all those factors to be present together at one time. Okay, so logically, scientifically, we don't see how this Darwin evolution actually would have happened. Next slide. Now, okay, from modern science, do we have some evidence that life is not matter? Life ultimately is belonging to a non-material entity. There are basically two main ideas. Life, origin of life, life is nothing but matter, that we have discussed so far. And another thought is, ultimately life is not matter. Life is due to an entity which is non-material, which is beyond the laws of matter. It is a non-material entity. That means it is not reducible in material terms, and it does not follow laws of physics, chemistry as we understand pertaining to matter. These are the two main hypotheses. So now, do we have any scientific evidence to the fact that life originated from a non-matter entity? Life is non-matter. So here I will present, first is what is accepted in the modern scientific terms as a near-death experience. This is a phenomena studied by scientists, doctors. At the time of death, in many cases, those cases which actually could be revived, they did not die, but clinically they were dead. The brain functions were not there, even the heartbeat was not there. Clinically they were dead, but they could be revived. In such cases, we have found that the observation, the consciousness was there. Though the brain functions were not there, still the consciousness was there. Which shows that consciousness is different from the brain activity, is different from brain, is different from what happens in our heart. It is different from that. So this is an example of near-death experience. This is an American singer, Pam Reynolds. She had basal artery aneurysm. The doctors told her that either anytime this aneurysm can burst and she will die. They might try to do an operation, but that's very risky, because to do that operation they have to produce hypothermic cardiac arrest. They have to reduce the temperature of the body, and then the cardiac arrest, and then the blood vessel, the aneurysm will become soft, and that can be incised. And then again revival of the temperature, but it's very risky. So she accepted to undergo that operation. So the operation was done in 1991, and operation went successfully. She was revived. But to the surprise, though at the time clinically she was dead, the heart was not beating, the brain waves were not there, but she could explain what she felt during the operation as it was going on, and she gave certain details which are impossible otherwise if the consciousness is not different from brain activity. For example, she described how the skull was opened, the saw, she could see it from above. She could even tell a sentence which was spoken by a nurse. The nurse commented, we have another problem, her arteries are too small. This comment, she said, I heard this, a nurse telling it. So it is a miracle. And these are many such incidences which are reported by doctors. You can Google it, near-death experiences. So this is a scientific phenomena which we are seeing, which indicates that life does not originate in matter. There is something higher, a realm of life. Next. So this is Michael Sobon, he is a cardiologist. There is a book written by him, Recollections of Death. There he writes, could the mind which splits apart from the physical brain be, in essence, the soul which continues to exist after final bodily death? according to some religious doctrines. As I see it, this is the ultimate question that has been raised by reports of NDE. Next slide. Now, there is another phenomena scientifically recorded, the phenomena of past life memories. Now, this is very interesting, very important for all of us, recorded by neutral scientists. They are not religionists. This is one Dr. Ian Stevenson. He is a psychiatrist and he has studied this phenomena in a scientific way, neutrally, of those cases which were reported to have the memories of their previous lives. And he, as much possible, he delineated the possibility of any fault, any tempering, anything, and he collected 225 such cases of remembrance of previous life. So this comes to show that when we are dead, the body is dead, but there is something which don't die, because then only it is possible that we are able to remember something from the previous life when this body was not there. So this reincarnation is a thing which is not just a faith, but there are enough evidences. If you again go to the internet, if you do a research, there are very good evidences that this phenomena exists. And if it is so, it is a very important question that then life should be some non-physical activity which is transcendental to body and whatever material is there. Next slide. Now, from another perspective, we try to understand, that is a common sense perspective. Is life matter or is life non-matter? From a common sense perspective. In Bhagavad Gita, I will cite this verse. This is from Bhagavad Gita. Krishna in Bhagavad Gita gives this a logical explanation to understand what is life. Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara tatha dehantara prapti dhiras tatra na muhyati. The meaning of this verse is, as in this life we pass from boyhood to youth to old age, similarly at the time of death we pass to another body. Those who are learned, therefore they don't lament for death. That's the meaning of this verse. So all of us, we observe consciously our bodies dying and new bodies coming in this very life. From cradle to the cremation ground, there is hardly any molecule which continues to be same in our body. Molecules are the building blocks, and we know that they are always in flux. So practically at the time of, in our old age, every 7 years, most of the molecules have transformed, new molecules. So practically we are dying, this body is dying every 7th year. But this death is happening slow by slow. Like this whole building, we can replace one brick by one brick. And it will be the similar framework, but it will be completely new constituents. So similarly, this body also throughout this life, we are changing, means old body is dying and new body is coming. But behind that, we all experience the same person. We experience, I am the same person who was playing some 20 years before, 30 years before, doing this, doing that, and now I am doing this, and our parents and people around us also relate to us as that same person. Though we have changed, the bodies have changed, but they relate to us as the same person. We experience ourselves as the same person, correct? So we are a constant seer of the changing body. That means we are different from the bodies. When we see something changing happening, the seer has to be different from that which is changing. Correct? So, this is a logic that we are different from the body which is changing. Another example I will give from common sense. We all sleep every day, every night we go to bed. What happens when we go to bed? We go to bed, and when we go to bed, we immediately don't sleep. We have some thoughts still going on in our mind, probably what we did throughout the day, like that. And then imperceptibly, we sleep. We don't realize when we slept, but it just imperceptibly we slept. That means we become disconnected from the daytime observation and consciousness. The daytime reality, we become disconnected, and we enter into another reality, another phase, which we call as dream. Correct? Now in the dream, we experience sorrow, joy, and all different emotions based on the dream. Suppose we are dreaming a nightmare, then there will be shivering, there will be sweating, there can be anything, shouting, anything. It is as real, the experience is as real. Suppose we see in the dream a tiger chasing us. It's as real experience as if in daytime a tiger will chase us. Correct? There is no difference in that. And when we wake up from that dream, we are relieved. Oh, it was not real. It was a dream. Correct? But the point to be pondered is, how do we say that the dream is not real? Experience is same. At that time it was completely real experience. So why do we say that it is a dream and the daytime what we see is the reality? The difference is the dream lasts only for some time, whereas this daytime experience continues for a much longer time. But this daytime experience is also going to come to an end. With death, this daytime experience will end. So in that sense, can we say that this daytime experience is reality? Because if reality is what exists ever, has no beginning and no end, if we conceive of reality in that term, can we say that our daytime experience is reality? Because that also has a beginning and that also has an end. A dream has smaller duration and our daytime experience has wider duration. But still, it is limited. So based on that, can we say, is there anything in our life which is real? If you follow this logic, is there anything in our life which is real? Any suggestions from the audience? We are experiencing all this. Yeah. The conscious seer who is experiencing all these different variations, that is a constant thing which continues throughout this whole journey. So actually this gives a hint that we as a person who is a conscious seer of all these changes which are happening in our life, that is the constant thing. That is a constant thing. The conscious seer, the conscious observer, that is a constant thing throughout our life, and actually that is the reality, and it cannot be matter, because matter always have an origin and an end. So in this way, logically also we can understand that the consciousness, because it is constant, it is not having a beginning or an end, this should be non-material, and consciousness also does not conform to the laws of physics, chemistry, etc. This gives a hint that this consciousness cannot be described in terms of just matter. Also another common sense, when a patient dies or anybody dies, we all generally experience, chala gaya, is gone, is gone. In every language we say in these terms, gone. Who has gone? Gone. Why we are saying gone? That means intuitively we all think that that thing which was the source of life is gone. What is remaining is the dead body, which is today also, body is always dead. It is never alive. But that which was animating it, which was making it alive, is now gone. So that means there are two realities. There is one body, and then there is something which is making it appear lively. And once that is gone, then the reality of the body becomes obvious that it is dead. Okay, so this is from the common sense also we can understand. Next slide. Now, what is the Vedic perspective? What is the source of life? What is the origin of life? Vedas deals elaborately on this subject matter. This is one from Shruti, one shloka which says, Keshagra shata bhagasya shatamsa sadrishatmakaha jivaha sukshma swarupoyam sankhyatito hi chitkanaha. This is in Sanskrit. The meaning is that soul is chitkanaha. There is an entity called soul, which is called chitkanaha. Chit means chetana. Chetana means consciousness. The atomic consciousness, like we have material atoms. So according to Shastras, there is another type of atom or particle, which is conscious particle, Chitkana. Material particle is not conscious, but there is a particle which is conscious, which is called Chitkana. That means it also has a form, it also has unique qualities, but it is completely of different nature from the material atom because it is conscious. Material atom is not conscious. So according to Vedas, the consciousness is due to the soul, which is atomic. Atomic in the sense that it has it is a particular entity. It is not just some vague thing. It's an entity, but it is spiritual. It is not matter. Therefore, we cannot define it in terms of space, length, breadth, like that. And it is not having material properties. Nainam chindanti shastrani, nainam dahati pavakaha. It cannot be cut into pieces. It does not follow all those laws. It has different nature. So the origin of life is soul according to Vedic science, and this soul is a non-material entity. Yeah, next slide. This is the soul which is the cause of consciousness throughout the body. Yatha, again from Bhagavad Gita, Yatha prakashayatyeekaha kritsnam lokam imam ravihi kshetram sheti tatha kritsnam prakashayati bharata. An analogy is given how sun illuminates the whole world, the whole universe. Similarly, the soul illuminates the whole body with consciousness. We perceive pain, sensations from throughout our body, and the soul spreads consciousness throughout, and because of that we are able to perceive the pains and pleasures. Yeah, next slide. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin. It is not born, it is not dead. Yeah, next slide. Where is it situated? Anoraniyam mahato mahiyam atmasya jantor nihitah guhaya. It is said to be situated in the region of heart. Not exactly in the biological heart, but in the region of heart. And therefore we see any emotions, any things, we immediately feel it's coming from here, from the region of heart. This is the seat of the soul, this region of heart. So love, emotions, we understand not from here, correct? So brain is a medium, but the seat of the soul is in the region of heart. Next. Now, individual souls, individual source of life, but then Shastra explain what is the source of all the life and all that exists. So in this is the Vedanta Sutra, Janmadi asya yataha, that from which everything originated, and that's described to be again a life. So as we are tiny atomic life particles, there is God, which is a supreme soul, super soul, Paramatma, Atma and Paramatma. And He is the origin of all the lives. We are a part and parcel of that supreme life called God. And we have an eternal relationship with Him. And we have forgotten that relationship. And that's why we are here in this material world. Actually, we don't belong to this material world. All these things one by one then are described in our scriptures. The first knowledge given is who we are, what is the origin of life, what is life and what is the origin of life. And starting from that, all knowledge is given in Bhagavad Gita, why we have come to this world, what is this world about, why it is created. Is there reality beyond this material world? Yes. Natad bhasete surya nan shashanko na pavakaha yad gatva na nivartante tad dhama paramam mama. In Bhagavad Gita, Lord Krishna says, beyond this material existence, there is another existence, which is spiritual. And having gone there, one does not return back. So this material world is a place of repeated birth, death, old age and disease. We doctors, we are trying to relieve humanity of diseases. But the advancement of this science should come to a point when we can stop all death, all diseases for good. That should be our objective. But that is not possible from a mechanistic, materialistic point of view. But that is possible. That is the thing which we all are longing, looking for, everyone. And the answer to that is we will find in our scriptures, in Bhagavad Gita, in Srimad Bhagavatam. And this is a science. This is not some belief system. If we see the definition of science, it is something which has a logic, which is logical, reasonable, and which can be verified by everyone. So similarly, this science of the Vedas is science in as much as the hypothesis is very logical. Hypothesis is very logical. The understanding that life comes from a distinct particle, it's logical. Because we see the consciousness is not following any laws of nature. So it's logical that there is a good possibility that this life is ultimately due to an entity which is non-material altogether. And we see reincarnation, facts different happening, corroborating that. So it's logical, reasonable, and it is also experienced, verified by all of us. So in the Shastras, there is a mechanism, process given. How we personally, each one of us can experience all that is spiritual truth given in the Vedas. How we can experience soul, how we can experience God, how we can talk to Him. All these things are given. The process is given. And there are examples in our literature of people who have attained those states. So in that sense, it is scientific. But it is a science of different variety. We cannot expect that science has to be confined to the premises of the laboratory. It's a presumption that reality is only matter. It's a presumption. It is not scientific that it has to be that only. If evidences come which show that there are entities, there are phenomena which we are not able to explain in terms of matter, we should be open to accept the possibility that reality can be non-material as well. Reality can be material as well as non-material as well. Why we should be closed to this hypothesis? So, the purpose of this small talk was to bring forward this point that thoughtful people should be serious about understanding what is reality. We are human beings, we have a special prerogative to understand what is life, who we are, why we have come here. Animals can't do this. They can't have such questions. They are only concerned about eating, sleeping, mating and defending. These four things. If we human beings, in spite of our developed consciousness, we also are only concerned about eating, sleeping, mating, defending, then how are we better than animals? Therefore, Shastra says, those who are only interested in eating, sleeping, mating, defending, they are no better, they are dvipad pashu, two-legged animals. And this is actually presently what all of us, the whole modern society, yes, technology has developed, medical science has developed, but ultimately it boils down to only these four things at the end: eating, sleeping, mating and defending. So in that sense, we have not actually progressed. Real progress should bring us to clear understanding and realization of who we are, what is the purpose of life, why we have to die, why we have to suffer, how to stop that forever. That should be the goal of human life. And I request all of you, based on this presentation, that you please give a serious thought, a serious effort to go through Bhagavad Gita in your life at least once. To understand life and all such important fundamental questions from the perspective of age-old knowledge given in Vedas. So, our society is primarily dedicated to spread these teachings of Bhagavad Gita, and in a way that thoughtful people can relate to it. It is not just some blind something just to have faith in. It can be intelligently understood. It can be intelligently explored and discussed. So you're all the class of society which are, which give direction to the society. So therefore, this is our humble effort to invite you to please read this Vedic literature, especially presented by Srila Prabhupada, ISKCON's founder Acharya, in a way that in the modern life, in the present day, a modern man can understand and practice this science in today's life. That is the speciality of these books. So with that, I will end my session. Hare Krishna. If there is, do we have some time for questions or? So
one. Some questions, sir.
Yes. Okay.
Definitely, because
okay.
You are telling.
Yeah.
The purpose of human life is
there one? Okay. Okay. Give him.
And then go through the spiritual channels. And the purpose of human life is because you have done some karma in the previous lives. Because you are telling that this is sequence of lives, basically on your karmic load. The previous life you have done something good, you have to entertain yourself and enjoy that punyam. And if you do a punyam, you get a better life. But this is not the purpose of what Lord Krishna tells us.
No.
That Krishna tells you do such karmas, not expecting any result from that. Either good or bad, don't expect. Give it on my name. I will take care of that karma. It will not bind you if you give it to me. And the second thing is karmic, that is because we have come to this life. Why you want to finish this life and death cycle? How you can finish it? You are telling, you give the karma to me because you will not have punyam or papam. There is no entertainment or no punishment. Then the second thing is, telling you should have jnana. How you get jnana? Nishkama karma. Then you will get, I give you the wisdom. You surrender to me and you say, you save me from this life and death cycle. He will give me chitta suddhi. That means enlightenment. He gives me the way to get the jnana. How you can get the wisdom to reach me. So unless you get wisdom, this is how this Bhagavad Gita tells. First thing is karma yoga. Second thing is bhakti yoga. Third thing is jnana yoga. Unless you get jnana, that you are not this body, as you are telling me in the previous talk, this is not your body. This is as a result of previous lives, you have got this body. You may get another body based on deeds, either a dog or a cat or some other animal or a creature or this is what Krishna tells us. So what is the purpose of life is? Come out of the Janana Marna, surrender to me. Last the slokam is
Sarvadharman Pritya
Mam Ekam Sarnavaja Hantva Sarapapetyu
Mokshayishyami Mashu.
Deliverance from life and death.
Yes.
Because life is not an entertainment.
Yes.
Every human creature in this all has suffered for his deeds.
Yes.
And you do unless you do something good. Unless you surrender your karma to Krishna, you are going to be having another life. That is not in your hands. He says, Krishna says, you do the job, leave the result to me. So this is what ultimately Bhagavad Gita tells me. You told the social level material kadu. There is another LED brain, there is something else.
Sorry, I don't understand Telugu. I don't understand Telugu.
Yes. You don't, there is a Sospra Sarira. That Sospra Sarira will transcend to another life. That is what you are telling us. It is not the material thing, this flesh, bone, skin and all this is not the things. That Sushma Sariram will be taken to, you said ultimately there is a world beyond this earth. That is Paramdhama, Goloka Paramdhama, Lord Krishna, where there is no darkness, every time it is light,
yes.
And you will have only happiness, blissfulness, Satchidanandam.
Yes.
That means always it is happiness, you will not have any suffering, there is no death, no birth, nothing. That you want to reach, what you have to do is karma, surrendering to me.
Yeah.
Bhakti, you chant my name and always think about me, and everything you think only about me, nothing else.
Yes.
You pray for me, you love me, and then you live for me only.
Yes.
Last breath also, you chant me and you live. Then he gives the ultimate moksha.
Yes.
This is what ultimate Bhagavad Gita tells. What the initial talk you told us is about Darwin, all this is millions of years it has gone through. But that is all not wanted for us. For me now I want it. I've gone through miseries.
Yes.
I've gone through happiness in this life. I don't want to any more life.
Yes.
Any more happiness, any more sufferings I don't want.
Yes.
I want only Lord Krishna and surrender to him and then beg him to give me moksham and wherever he wants to take me, let him take.
Okay.
This is what ultimately
Right.
I come for this few words I have
Okay.
been going through because I became sick. I worked as a doctor, I go without some purpose is there, money making and all this is part of the bad material world. But ultimately I don't want to have another life. I want to go to the feet of God Krishna and with your blessings I hope
Hare Krishna.
I will bless. Thank you sir. Thank you
Thank
sir.
you. Hare Krishna.
What I understand, you were mostly talking about Advaita philosophy.
Actually, I have not touched on any philosophy. I was just talking about how the present day modern science it is not able to explain the consciousness and that we are not this body, we are soul. Advaita, that is a very high thing. I have not touched anything. It's the Bhagavad Gita, the beginning of that.
So, my next question is, I have someone who also is a teacher. He says that ultimate goal of life is to become a server of the God. But from my own understanding, what I feel is this concept of Nama, Rupa, and even the concept of beauty has no absolute reality. There is no absolute thing like a name or absolute form or even absolute beauty. But what I cannot accept in this thing is, in this philosophy of yours, you praise a particular God with a particular name and a particular form and the beauty of it, which has no relevance in absolute terms. Because the whole concept of Nama, Rupa and even the concept of beauty has no absolute relevance. It's a relative thing which every species has its own ideas of. So how does this worship of Nama, Rupa and
How it is to be accepted in the reality?
contradiction our concept of Advaita or
Yeah.
formless
Yeah.
consciousness,
Yeah.
which one is supposed to be beyond the others?
Yeah. Mike. Yeah. So among the spiritualists, there have been these two thoughts. Ultimately, what is the nature of absolute truth? Is it personal or is it impersonal? So, if you see from Bhagavad Gita, the direct meaning of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says, Sarva dharmana parityajya mam ekam sharanam vraja. This is my last teaching. Sarva guhyatamam bhuya, shranu me parama. This is my sarva guhyatamam, most confidential knowledge. Krishna says, man mana bhava mad bhaktu. Remember me, worship me, correct? Krishna before this has already said that we are not this body, we are soul. And he said earlier, Anityam asukham lokam imam prapya bhajasva mam. Having got this anityam, now you worship me. So, if Krishna's form is also anityam, it is temporary like our form. His name is also material like our name or any other name. Then why Krishna would tell this knowledge as the topmost knowledge, which will relieve him from all cycle of birth and death, if it is material, if it is as temporary as any other form. Shankaracharya, a great exponent of Advaitavad, he said, Narayana para abhyaktat. Narayana is beyond Abhyakta. This material manifestation comes from a different level, Abhyakta, but Narayana is even beyond that. So, when in the scriptures there is a description of impersonal feature, that is one of the feature of the absolute truth. It is not the ultimate feature of the absolute truth. In the ultimate sense, the absolute truth is a person, has a form. Because of that, we also have a form. But that's an imitation. The soul also has a form eternally. Everything, whatever we have, should be there in the origin. Otherwise, that cannot be said to be the origin. If we have personalities, there should be a concept of personality in the absolute. Otherwise, how do we have the personalities? But the present, this body which we are having, that has temporary forms because the energy is inferior energy. But there are in the scriptures we find in Bhagavad Gita very clearly that ultimately we are persons. So there are both things, impersonal as well as personal. From the person comes impersonal. It is not the other way around. So ultimately, as you see, when Lord Krishna came, his birth is not like our birth. Janma karma chame divyam, he says. My birth and activities are divya. They are not material. He says, Tyaktva deham punarjanma, one who understands factually my birth and death are not material, he also will be relieved from cycle of birth and death. And we practically see, described in Bhagavatam, when Lord appeared, he appeared with Shankha, Chakra, Gada, Mukuta. That description is in scriptures. We understand Krishna from scriptures, correct? That's the source. But then in scriptures, this is the description of Krishna's birth. We cannot conceive how an ordinary body will appear like that. Then similarly, Krishna at the age of 6 killed Putana. We don't expect any normal child to do that. So therefore, from the Shastra point of view and from practical how Lord Krishna appeared and his activities, we can understand that there is Brahma Jyoti, impersonal aspect. But ultimately there is a personal aspect. If there is no personal aspect, whom we are praying to? Whom we are praying to? If we are praying to, there is someone who hears us, who responds to it. These are personality traits. That means the absolute truth should have a personality. Otherwise, how is he hearing? How is he responding? If you go in Shruti, Yato va imani, the absolute truth is described, Yato va imani bhutani jayante, yena jatani jivanti, yat pravanti abhishanti, tad Brahman. Brahman is one from which everything has originated, who maintains everyone. Father, mother maintains child. Maintenance requires an understanding, and I want to maintain him. That means personality traits. So like that, there are so many evidences from just Bhagavad Gita. If we take it direct meaning, it is very clear. Krishna says, Aham sarvasya prabhava. I am the origin of everything. Krishna is standing in form. He says, I am the origin of everything. So as far as Bhagavad Gita is concerned, if we take the direct meaning of Bhagavad Gita, then very clearly it is ultimately the Krishna, the person who is the God, and he is not having a material body because he says it's a divya body. But what is happening is, in a spiritual circle, we tend to twist the meaning by interpreting it. But that is not allowed in scriptures. There is a way to understand. Like in medical books, we have to be genuinely concerned about the intention of the author. We cannot have our own idea and superimpose on him. So therefore, there is a methodology how to understand the scriptures called hermeneutics. In that, first we have to take the direct meaning. If direct meaning is not possible, then only indirect meaning. So if you take the direct meaning of Bhagavad Gita, it's very clear that absolute truth is in ultimate sense is a person. Yes, it has impersonal feature also, but ultimately it is person. But that's a very detailed subject matter. It's we cannot finish in a small discussion, but this is a very important question. So please, you are requested to take this one Bhagavad Gita as it is and go through this once at least. Thank you. Hare Krishna.